We are back on What the Funk with one of my all-time favorite colleagues, Mr. Jimmy Sebastian. Jimmy, we haven't talked in a little while. I know we've kind of exchanged a few emails. Um, you were at Seven Lakes before I started and were there afterwards. You must have put in like almost a decade at
Yeah.
Seven Lakes.
Hey, Jeremy. It's
Hey,
great to
man.
see you. Good morning, and good to be on the What the Funk podcast. And yes, yeah, we spent a lot of time together at Seven Lakes. I joined in 2012 and left in 2021. So
Oh,
about 9.5 years it's a long time.
man, we're gonna have to dig into that because things changed so much in that time. You when you started, what were there like 10 people there?
That's right. Yeah, about 12, I would say.
And you were
And
instrumental in bringing me on in my first interview process. You were always really skeptical of salespeople, which I appreciate. So I think I did enough to win you over. But in the early days there, you and I actually spent a lot of time together. You were customer facing. I think you did a lot of the internal management, but we're also very good in front of customers. You picked up oil and gas very quickly. So those were some of my kind of favorite days in my Seven Lakes experience was getting on the road with you, doing work with you, burning the midnight oil for sure. And then I think as the company grew a little bit, you actually started having more defined roles, right? You sort of stepped into a chief product officer role. I was kind of heading up sales, individual contributor on the sales side. And then since then, you've been at Albertsons and doing some sort of executive level um, analytics work. But I want to go way, way before that. Like,
Mhm.
who's Jimmy Sebastian? Where are you from? How did you end up in California? Where did you go to school? What led to us first crossing paths in 2012? And I want to hear the full story of who Jimmy Sebastian is.
Sounds great, Jeremy. I will start at the beginning. So I'm originally from India, the south of India, a state called Kerala, which is like at the southernmost west tip of India. And but as I was growing up, and my father had a transferable job, so he would stay in a place for about 3-4 years, and then we would get transferred. So I did travel all over south and the east of India. So I was in places like Calcutta, Madras, Chennai, as it's called now, and Cochin, which is my hometown in India.
Okay.
And as I grew up, in metros, I did get a good understanding of the diversity of India, and went to school. So finished high school and then went to my engineering degree at IIT Madras, which is one of the premier
Yep.
institutes in India for engineering. And then where I met a bunch of great people, and still connected to them, and it's been great. And actually, the peer group is a really great part of what the college life is all about. And then
Yeah.
I did my MBA shortly thereafter from the Indian Institute of Management in Calcutta. And then from there on, I decided that, as I was looking at majors or areas to go into, I decided that, whether it was a choice between finance or information technology, for example. And
Yep.
so sales and marketing were not really my great forte. So I kind of gravitated towards these areas. And anyway, so
Yeah.
I chose information technology and went into data warehousing, data mining. So I joined PricewaterhouseCoopers in their consulting division for data warehousing and data mining in Calcutta. And then from there on, shifted to Bangalore, and I had a stint with a company called I2, which is now called Blue Yonder. So it's a supply chain planning company.
Okay.
It's used by many, retail, manufacturing, and other sectors too, for their supply chain, demand planning, forecasting, inventory planning, etc. And so that was it's a great time. I was consulting in the Asia Pacific region in Singapore and Thailand. So that was the first time I
Okay.
was going outside India. It's a great experience to other cultures and other cuisines. So it was great. And then at that time, around that time, I met my wife, and after a few months, we decided to get married. And after getting married in 2002, I joined the same company as my wife, which is a UST, and they're a information services provider, such as you can think of it as a small TCS, like the Tata Consulting or Infosys. It's a smaller
Sure.
company similar to that.
Yep.
but
Wipros, like
yes,
yeah,
exactly. So that space, and so along, I was building my career around data as a consultant, as an analyst, and a project manager, and then came. So by the time I was already in LA, and the family grew, we had kids, and we are now settled in this suburb of LA called the Simi Valley, which is about
yep,
40 miles northwest of LAX, right? And yeah, continued my journey along the data side, and that's when, and I was leading the BI practices and the operation ticket master. That's when the entrepreneurial bug bit me. Like I really wanted to
mm,
do something which is with a much smaller company, starting off things, really wanted to build something together and wanted to put my data and analytics background to some good use. And that's how, Shiva Rajagopalan, who is the CEO, when he contacted me, we were a very small company at that time, primarily
mm,
services. And like I said earlier, about 12 people. And I joined, and but I didn't join thinking that I will continue the consulting business. I wanted to build a products company. So my intention was always to come in and build the products company. So after we, when we were there, we had a few clients, which was, Bill Barrett in Denver. At that time, that the company was one of our customers,
oh yeah,
um, and we had a couple of customers in Houston as well, right? And then, as the company grew, in about 2015, I said, like, the organic growth of the company, and I think at that time is when you joined. So I forget which
yeah.
year you joined, Jeremy. Maybe it was 2013.
2013.
Yes, that's
Yeah,
right. So after a
2013.
while, Shiva was like doing all the sales, and I said that's not really sustainable, and then he also felt that, right. We needed somebody to have the sales focus, right? So that's how you joined. And I don't know if you had that impression, but I didn't have anything or skeptical about salespeople. I was quite happy to bring somebody focused because then Shiva can focus on other areas. I mean, he needed the bandwidth, but we did. I think we did work together, or maybe in the interview process, I was like really probing, but I forget. I don't remember any of that those conversations. But what
No,
I do,
I think yeah, so there's so much going on here that I have
yeah.
to rewind a little bit. I don't think that I think that so what Seven Lakes was doing was not new for you because you'd been in the data reporting and analytics space outside of oil and gas and saw how transferable it was. For me and really any salesperson coming in, it was sort of revolutionary. All of the reporting and integration at that point was point to point, that sort of spaghetti architecture. Data
Mhm.
management and data warehousing was a little bit of a foreign concept outside of really just the majors in oil and gas. So it wasn't just definitely wasn't a product sale, right? It was a very consultative sale that
Yes.
resulted in a services engagement. And I do think it took a level of not product pushing, right? Like very consultative, very proactive. And it went really well. I mean, 2013 was kind of the first year for me culturally. It was a little bit different, right? Like I was the only white guy in the company. Everywhere else that I'd worked before that, everybody was a white guy, especially in oil
Uh-huh.
and gas. Besides maybe a few of the developers in the back office, you'd have some diversity. But for me, Seven Lakes was really eye opening to it was a lot of first generation people in the US like yourself that
Hmm.
really had a tireless work ethic and a real passion to succeed. And at a small company, that can be a blessing and a curse. A blessing because you can scale very fast. One employee could be equal to 1.5 employees at competitive organizations. But at the same time, because it's such a small company, you bring in a Hari Dutt or you bring in a Shrivan or a Simone, where can they go? Right? There's only so much of a ceiling where you can grow within a small organization that you basically have to sort of hire yourself, promote yourself by creating a new product line, right?
Exactly.
Or a different
Exactly.
area or discipline. And I think a lot of people followed your lead on that because I saw you hands on creating certain products. But let's go back to moving to the US. So
Mhm.
you were in Calcutta, right? You were doing a little bit of work in Thailand. So how and why Los Angeles? Like did you move over there for work? Did you get a work visa? Like, how did this all work out where all of a sudden you wake up one day and you're living in Simi Valley outside of LA?
Yeah, yeah. Interesting question. So I did agree. My always had the idea of coming over to the U.S. Even I was working in India, and originally, actually, I was recruited to I2 or the supply chain company to be placed in Dallas. Right. So I was
Okay.
kind of set on coming over here, and that's when the dot com bubble burst, or the aftermath of the dot com bubble bursting led to a lot of like retrenchments and all of, a tough situation as far as recruiting is concerned in the US, right? So the company was not able to get me to the US. And so then that's where I ended up exploring the APAC region, right? But since I had that in mind, so the next opportunity I got with UST, so they had big offices, and we were consulting, doing a lot of analytics consulting for Anthem Blue Cross, which is the health insurer.
Okay.
At that time, it was called
Sure.
WellPoint, right? So then that's how we came over to the US. And also the icing on the cake was that my wife and I were in the same location. Usually, when working couples come over from India, because of the work situation, one may be in one city and then the other person is in a different city, and then you have to do a lot of traveling, right? And so this was really convenient and fortunate for us that we were both in LA, and the customer base, or the client base, and the number of projects here were many. So then we could work on it. And so, we both came here working in different departments for Anthem Blue Cross, or consulting for Anthem Blue Cross, while being part of USD. So
Got it.
that was the story behind coming over. And initially, when because of the client location being here, we came to a place called Woodland Hills, which is in the San Fernando Valley. It's like about 30 minutes from where I'm right now. And after a while, as the family grew, I decided to move to a little bit of a less urban or quieter place called Simi Valley. And that's where we are.
Yeah, it's very nice out there. My first exposure to Thousand Oaks, Westlake Village, Simi Valley was when I was interviewing with Seven Lakes, and I remember sitting in traffic. Of course, I think on the 101 or the whatever the 5 or the 405, one of those highways where
Yeah.
you're just sitting
Yeah.
forever
405
trying to
is the
get to
worst freeway
LAX.
in the world, or in the US.
It's it's so bad. But I remember thinking this could be kind of nice, like uh, working. I'm always going on business trips to the oil cities, so
Hmm.
I think I live in the best one with Denver being that. But then you've got Houston, you've got some Calgary, you've got Oklahoma. Those places are fine, but it's like, oh, you know what? Now I can sprinkle in some Los Angeles into this. Maybe go down to Hollywood for an afternoon, maybe take one of the canyon roads and go down to Malibu and stick my feet
Yeah.
in the sand on a business trip. Like this seems kind of cool. So that was pretty fun for me, and I think you also get exposed to um, a different talent pool just in such a large city. Um, but you're still there, you still live there, and in 2012, right? So did you know Shiva before this? I mean, there's a billion people in India or whatever. I'm guessing you
Yeah.
didn't, but
It's funny how it's an interesting point, and actually a very coincidental thing. So Shiva contacted me over LinkedIn, right? So he was,
yeah.
as you were mentioning, he was looking for talent in the region, and analytics talent, and then he just found me on LinkedIn. He was going by maybe looking at my educational background, so okay, somebody from IIT, he already knows that they have gone through a certain level of rigor in terms of their academics and abilities, right? So that's probably how he found me, or he found me through LinkedIn. And as we and it turned out he had, later as we started talking, it turned out that he and I had gone to the same um, middle schools. He and I, my
I
dad and his dad knew each other. The families knew each other, but I
Wow.
had not met his parents, right, at that time. But families knew each other, and we also lived, or the families also lived back in India, not far from each other. And so after, while we were in school together, we were not in the same year, and I had moved on and to go to a different city, but he was still there. And so our paths didn't really cross when we were in school, or in elementary, middle school, and high school. But later, it all came together. And so that also gave me a level of comfort in that, okay,
Right.
this is somebody, and probably even him, that, okay, this is somebody that the families know each other. So because you're trusting this person, and even as I'm joining, we're looking at, and I'm thinking, should I join this company? I don't know. It's a small company. It's unknown. What do we do, or how do we know? And so I think from his
Yeah.
perspective and from my perspective, it gave us a lot of comfort factor that the families knew each other and we had such a long history, even though we did not really talk or meet at that time. Yeah,
That's really
that's
cool. And it
really
was a
it's too coincident.
I I don't think I knew that. I mean, I guess I knew that there was some. I would assume that when he was looking, he was looking for somebody who had IIT experience. I
Yeah,
didn't know the rest. IIT plus business intelligence and analytics.
right,
That part
exactly,
makes sense. And of course,
exactly.
then Los Angeles. So you're narrowing the pool down a little bit, but now you're
Yeah,
talking about even like deeper connections. And I think at the
yeah.
time that you joined, like you said, two maybe three clients, but I knew the company had something. It
Mhm.
was pretty well established at that point, at least with all the work that Seven Lakes was doing with Lynn. There was a
Exactly.
lot to go to market with. It was
Yeah.
far less purely uh, conceptual, I should say, and really
Mhm.
some unique things that frankly companies still don't have a great handle on today. Whether it be like, remember the well profitability dashboard, the
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
profitability
yeah. That we built
dashboard.
together. Yes, yeah.
That
It
that
basically looked
was
at all of the
awesome.
yeah all of the profitability analysis from multiple perspectives, like financial perspective, operational perspective,
Right.
and then also looking at the the leases and everything, and then considering all those factors to figure out which ones we would keep operating, right, or the operators should keep operating, and which ones to
Yeah.
probably like abandon or shut down.
It was really one of the companies I work with now, Zeno Technologies, does something similar and incorporates some of the elements that we had, like almost like the LOS slider. Like
Hmm.
if you say, okay, well, if natural gas prices go up or down, then how does this potentially affect my lease operating statement? But these are things that we were doing 10 years ago that I don't think the industry still has a full grasp on now. And the challenge, of course, is analytics and data. And I want to kind of transition to talking about that, at least as I see it, which is the narrow lens of oil and gas. Anything that you do from an analytics and reporting standpoint is really the end result of a successful data management project. And I'm curious how you view some of the differences in your career that you've seen at companies like Ticketmaster, who have true big data, at Albertsons, which is retail. How do things differ from oil and gas? Or would you say, like, to distill it down, it's actually somewhat similar. Like, I'm curious from your perspective as a data and analytics expert, how do these industries look similar? How are they completely different? How are things handled? Is it the same? Is it vastly unique per industry? Like, give me some of what's in your brain from being an analytics and data guy in multiple different industries.
Yeah, it's a great question. There's actually lot of different angles to look at, but let me try to address some the key ones. I think all of these, the commonalities that they do have data, right? Obviously, and it's but the volume and the variety and the type of data is different, right? In
Okay.
oil and gas, you do generate a lot of data. While let's say you do some operations like drilling, real time drilling operations, right, or real time monitoring, such as SCADA, and in those areas is where you generate a lot of data, and but then you don't you try to synthesize it and try to or summarize it, and then to take certain key information, extract some information out of it, which upon which you can act, because usually sensors, if they some sensor is looking at how a well is performing, let's say a pressure sensor, then most of the time you're getting a lot of data, but there is no action to be taken, or there's no problem, and you don't need to store all that data, right? So you only need to look for anomalies, and then you take that, right? In other industries like retail, at Albertsons, like, you have millions of transactions happening every day, so there is a lot of different
Mhm.
data, and you do have to take each and every input there, because it's talking about the customer, what they're buying, where they are buying, what are the products that they're buying together. So the information that needs to be processed, and the variety of it is different. And in Ticketmaster, again, it's thinking about the consumer behavior, like, what concerts are you going to, right? How are you engaging with? And
True.
the value of that may be to different customers, or different the clients of Ticketmaster, such as the promoters or the arenas or the artist groups, right? They may want to understand their fans better. So there's a lot of like value
True.
added monetization type of work that you can extract out of the company's data and then provide it. So let's put it this way. One difference that I see is that the kind of data and what you do with it in terms of processing the volume is different. And the second is, how do you externally monetize that data is different. Typically in oil and gas, we don't really monetize that data. We use it for internal purposes, right? And on the production
Right.
side, the volume of data is still small. And even there, our focus is, how do we keep operating and make sure that our assets are performing and producing to the fullest potential, right? This is the focus of the data. But what a common theme, Jeremy, and where I think, like you said, there are still problems. I mean, whatever we were working on 10 years ago, those problems still exist. And the reason they exist is that companies are not figured out the right way to utilize this data for their business purposes, right? If the business analytics and business intelligence is fully integrated into the day-to-day operations of the company, of somebody, let's say there's an analyst that's looking at it, a production analyst, right? If they are able to really leverage the data that is being produced by the systems and the analytics and utilize it in their data decision making the right way, then the company reaps great rewards. And this is similar for other industries too,
Definitely.
right? And where most companies fail is that there's a lot of tools. You'll find every company has business intelligence tools, reporting, analytics, dashboards. But how well are they used in the company, and how well is the use
Yeah.
of analytics as embedded into the psyche of the company or into their day-to-day operations? That's where what companies fail or they succeed, and that's what differentiates a great operator from a mediocre or poor operator.
I love that. So I think that is I mean, you did it in about 2.5 minutes, which is pretty impressive. But yes, you're looking for outliers. You're looking for anomalies. You're looking for spikes and decreases. Whereas the data that you're collecting from retail or Ticketmaster, for example, is for future marketing to that person.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
not what you do in oil and gas, right? You're
yeah,
looking how to can I take the information that I have here and become a little bit more predictive in the future? How can I
exactly.
avoid some of
Yeah,
these pitfalls going forward? Or assuming that they're going to happen, how can I reduce the amount of time that then the well will go down because we know it's going to happen? Let's become predictive with it. Um, you actually kind of planted a seed in my head, which is interesting. So I'm not sure if you observed this as much toward the end of your time at Seven Lakes, but earlier on in my time at Seven Lakes, there was a ton of Spotfire. Like Spotfire had really dominated the analytics world. And Tim, my former podcast partner, worked at Tibco and was one of the initial demo guys for Spotfire. So near and
hmm,
dear to this podcast and to where his heart was on the analytics side. But there was kind of a shift I started to see around 2017, 2018 away from using Spotfire for all of your analytics and reporting and doing more with Power BI. And
hmm.
my thought was that was probably because it was just cheaper. And then maybe in some ways it was easier for the back office, the accountants, the finance people, some of the engineers to digest that information in a more simplistic platform like Power BI. But sort of listening to what you said, I almost wonder if there's a lack of confidence or comfort in the data itself that the end user of that data is saying, well, why do I need a really expensive analytics platform if I don't fully trust or view the data as the source of truth? Right.
Yeah,
And I think this all sort of brings it back to, and you were big on this too, and part of why Seven Lakes went down this whole path of the, I forget what it was called, but the master data management project, which was sort
hmm,
of like clients started asking about that, but that's really where it all starts. For a company that has 5,000 wells, right, and then you have various different source systems, none of who talk to each other, and then different people in the office living in silos not talking to each other. it becomes very difficult to reconcile all of your data and trust the data across the organization. And that can lead to lots of different challenges. But one of the things I always admired and appreciated with you, I think because of your background in data, was we can build anything beautiful on the front end in any of the tools that you want or in an HTML5 dashboard, but we have to get down to the data. So some of the fuzzy logic and some of the integration API capabilities that you and your team created were really some of the most valuable things that Seven Lakes had in that early kind of rapid growth analytics phase. And then, of course, like you said, the money came in, you were able to successfully raise, I think it was like a $20 million Series A or something like that, and then
Yes.
push forward into actually productizing some of the things. So talk to me a little bit about the journey of you're running like a consulting services organization. Money comes in. Now we want SaaS revenue. We don't care as much about the consulting revenue. What then was your focus and your pivot to kind of like take a what had become like a pretty decent sized company at that point from being a consulting firm to now being a products company? Like, what were some of the things that were challenging that you enjoyed about that? And how did that kind of fundamentally change the organization that you were running, going from services to product centric?
Right. So, as we were going through this journey of equipping companies with analytics, right, like Lynn Energy, like Bill Barrett, like Concho, and others, what we found, Jeremy, and in many cases we discovered it together, you and I, as we would talk to customers, is that the root cause is that there is no data, or there's poor data capture, or there's a data quality problem, right? Because
Yeah,
garbage in, garbage out, as the cliche goes, right? So if there was
totally.
a beautiful Spotify dashboard, but there was no source data system which was like good, and the source systems were not talking to each other or cross-referenced, so then the reports and dashboards that people spend millions on were not very useful, right? And that's where analytics was failing, right? And so as we discovered these problems, in some cases we discovered that they needed a source system for data capture. In some other cases, we discovered they needed a master data management system. They needed integration tools. They need data quality tools, and in some cases they also needed workflow tools for people to collaborate. Right, like so during
Right.
a pre-spud planning process, they needed to collaborate. Some of that data was being generated there. Tracking permits, right? Keeping track of all the checklists that are needed for pre-spot planning. So what we discovered was there is a huge opportunity in creating analytics and business workflow solutions, right? So that's what we started putting together. But then as we started conceptualizing and working on some of those, what I had been pushing towards and realizing, along with you and Shiva, is that we couldn't do this just organically growing, right? We could take the money
No.
that's coming from projects and then put it towards it, because we needed to really build some of these capabilities, and the window of opportunity could close pretty quickly, because our competitors were also coming in and trying to get into some of these areas. So we needed to build out our product pretty quickly, and for that we needed external capital infusion, right? So that's where
Totally.
I pushed Shiva to say, hey, we can do this. We need money from we need funding, we need a capital raise, and we need to also build out our team, right, in terms of the having more focused revenue generation, more focused marketing, HR and
Yeah.
finance together as we put together our team. And we also need to grow beyond the US to have development centers in other places like India, right? And so for
Yes.
all of
Yes.
this could not be handled with just the money coming in from services. And so that's where we went out into the market looking for partners, private equity and venture capital type of partners, to raise that money in order that we address these business and market opportunities pretty quickly, right? And build out all of these product lines.
And really made a pretty significant impact in doing so. The concept of, you know, Seven Lakes to me at its core was always sort of uh, a company that started with the data. Like
Mhm.
some of the most beautiful and aesthetically pleasing visuals, whether it be what FDG was, which then became Join, with some of the dashboards, even with things like AFE workflow, which were more sort of user intensive as opposed to looking beautiful, but still look and feel was very comfortable. The UX that Seven Lakes put forward was awesome, but to me, at its core, Seven Lakes really understood the data. that mattered to people. And I think a lot of credit goes to you and your team for placing such an emphasis on that. But it was really like the shift I thought was pretty fascinating because there had been products built. Like FDG was there, but it was really sort of like, okay, the first step is instead of just going out in the field and sending your lease operators out and keying things in by on a computer, we're actually going to give you an iPad to do that with. And
Right.
that was like a revolutionary concept 10 years ago, believe it or not. And then it was, okay, well, we can automatically pull in your SCADA data and it's going to come in a different color. Right? Okay, that's cool. And then it was, we're actually going to help you operate and route by exception. That was a big step, right? It's taking whatever data you had and then starting to Uberize the oil field, make recommendations of where you can go and where you should go and what makes sense. And instead of just driving in the same route every single day, let's actually be a little bit more responsive to what's happening in the field and then route people appropriately. And I think something you probably haven't seen this as much, but there's a big emphasis now on emissions, right? So one of
Mhm.
my clients called Earthview, really fascinating company, young CEO. I see them poised for significant growth or really being able to do whatever they want, but they put like methane emissions sensors on every pad. So you put like four of these sensors on each pad, and they're trying to shift the paradigm in the same way that we did with operating by exception. It's right now there's basically a fire truck that oil and gas companies are driving around in the field looking to put out a fire. They're looking for smoke and then trying to react to it. And this is basically like, well, wouldn't it make sense if we put like smoke alarms in the field so that instead
Yeah.
of just having to drive around in a square, you can actually kind of route that fire truck directly to where it needs to go? And companies are quickly coming along to this, and I think that's an industry that's poised for growth. And even the reporting, whether it be to federal or internal or investor centric, from an emissions analytics standpoint, has a lot of legs to it and a lot of room to grow. But I think back on that time, and it established a really important baseline for me from, okay, let's capture the data. And now let's actually be a little bit more predictive and responsive to the data that we're seeing. And
Yes.
that to me
Yes.
was just fundamentally cool. I don't see every company doing that. And my theory on that is I don't think that they necessarily know how to use that data.
Hmm.
How were you able to come up with these algorithms and kind of thoughts in the background to take so much of this data and then start to Uberize or become predictive with it in the field? Was that from experience that you and Sachin and Hari and others had? Or was that just kind of fundamental to you for, okay, we have the data, now what do we do with it?
Yeah. So it was an evolution, Jeremy, and really utilizing some of the uh, industry trends or our background, in other industries. I think that's where, if you think about it, I did not have an oil and gas background coming in to the company,
Sure,
right? And as did some of the others, but like some other people like Shrivan and Hari, they came in from Schlumberger and Exxon, so they did have that background. So
sure,
we were a good mix of people with background in oil and gas and also background in other industries or like let's say more broader industry trends that we were tuned to.
sure,
And what we did was just staying very tuned to what was happening in the market and what was happening in the software industry as a overall trends and new functionality being put out. So we started off with analytics, then saying analytics needs to be embedded with workflows, then looking at addressing some of the basic data quality challenges, right? And then with FTG, looking at, okay, now this data needs to be captured. It's that there is an issue in the data capture. The what you call it, the grease sheets were getting smudged, right? And that information was not coming in correctly. So that's where, how can we provide an automated interface or a user-friendly interface to pumpers, right, and field technicians so they can capture some of this data. And then the evolution was now
yeah,
we have we can integrate and bring in data from SCADA, like you said. So going from manual input to bringing in SCADA data, and then the next step we were looking at was how can we read sensors and get that data through NFC, right, so that it gets integrated. So at every point in time, what we looked at was looking at all of the latest technology. And I think Shiva was also a big on this. And, it was great
definitely.
that we were lock in step on that. That we were looking at, okay, what was Amazon doing? What was Google doing? right? And these are not companies in the oil and gas space. And what new technologies are they putting it out? And then how can we leverage some of that in our products, right? And
Yeah.
so having that broader view and experience outside of oil and gas also helped in bringing these new technologies and continuously evolving our product. And then thinking of, once we have NFC, then we think of how do we integrate our production planning, and then look at predictive. By that time, I think about 2016 and 17 onwards, we had machine learning and predictive analytics
Yeah.
becoming really big.
Yep.
And but
Yes.
in oil and gas, other than drilling, they were not really utilizing a lot of that, right? So that is a greenfield opportunity that we saw, saying we should be able to take these predictive algorithms, and the algorithms are really actually available from as packages, or to be customized from vendors like Google or Amazon or AWS, for example. So we work with Pinaki, who
Yep.
was our chief architect, in order to take some of those and then plug them onto the oil and gas data, and then be able to say predict downtime. That's a and we actually refer
Right.
to some of the latest papers put out, from USC and other universities by petroleum engineering researchers on what should some of these parameters be for predictive analytics. So we were really doing some cutting edge stuff in terms of reading those papers and looking at those algorithms and then trying to code them into a
Definitely.
product. So it was like a good mix of external technology, keeping up with the latest research, and then always looking out for the customer and creating a product which was at the cutting edge. And this is where that our smaller customers could leverage some of this latest technology, even though they did not have a huge budget like an Exxon or a Chevron.
Yes. Yeah. And it, in some ways, it leveled the playing field. Just
Yes.
even having that level of reporting. And one of the things I think that Seven Lakes did really well from an innovation side of things is you field a request from a customer to build something, and you
Mhm.
build it. But in the process of building it, you also start to understand their business and the industry a little bit more, and then come with a recommendation for a phase two, right? Of, well, now we've built your report, but you want to
Yeah.
know what you can do with this report, you can do this. And I think
Yeah.
that's where the disruption and innovation starts to take place. Um, Curious from your standpoint, like you've been you were in oil and gas for almost 10 years.
Mhm.
Now you're out. You've been in kind of the retail space. What do you think lies ahead for you? Do you think that you may end up back in oil and gas on the analytics side? Do you plan to start your own consulting firm? You think you'll continue in retail? I'm sure it's going to be data and analytics in some capacity for you, but like when you look at your go forward plan, like what does it look like? What's in the cards for you, Jimmy?
Yeah. So it's something that I'll end up doing in data and product. So data and product is my or data was what I was originally about, and then product is something that I really fell in love with while at Seven Lakes, building the company, building the product suite. Right. So
Yeah.
the job at Albertsons came about because it was at the confluence of data product. I was doing data products, creation and management, creating template platforms for data products. So whatever I do in the future, and I'm looking at different options like consulting, like working with larger corporates, and never say never to oil and gas. So I'm also
Of course.
keeping my eyes open and options open there too. But it'll be something to do with data and product, and hopefully the confluence of the two, where I can help companies either as a consultant or as an executive working in them, to really leverage their data assets to the maximum, monetize them better and to the best possible ability, if that is what the market demands. But also, I'm all about building simple, intuitive products, and this is something that we both, with your help and with others, we honed over at Seven Lakes, where we were trying to build very complex technology but present a simple interface to the customer so that it was easily adopted. And that's what actually differentiated our products from some of our competitors. That how easily could people with almost zero training adopt these products and really learn them on the go, right? So I'm about building simple, intuitive products that help companies leverage their data to the maximum.
Well, you're one of the best I've ever met at doing that. And I remember, if you remember Ken Dalton. at Debit,
Mhm. Oh
right?
yeah, yeah.
What he said, and sort of the challenge he threw to you and to Simone and Hurry and your team in general was like, it has to be, people need to get to their information in 3 clicks or less than 7 seconds. Otherwise, they
Yes,
start to check out.
yes, yes. So those
So
were like
you're
really high
talking about
standards.
very high standards, and you're talking about massive amounts of data points in a fairly robust dashboard. But I have to be able to click into my region, into into my key metric in 7 seconds or 3 clicks. It's like, okay, man. But you were able to do that, and it's a skill that I appreciate more and more as time goes on. It has to be sort of like, look at Google, right? If you look at Google in and of itself, it's like, well, it's just a search engine, right? But then you think
Yes,
about everything that's going on behind the scenes to make it work the way that it does. Um, that's why they have some of the best developers in the world. And you always have to stay ahead because the next Bing or whoever is always trying to come and eat your lunch. Something that I like to do on What the Funk, and I'm going to put you on the spot. I did not prepare you for this, but I want to do a little
okay.
rapid fire questions. And you have to kind of give me the first thing that comes to mind. So
Sounds
here we
exciting.
go.
Let's go.
We'll start with your favorite city to travel to in the US.
Denver.
Okay, we'll take it. How about your favorite city to travel to internationally?
uh, London.
Okay. All right. I could see you there
Yeah, my
wearing a
brother
trench
lives
coat or
there.
something.
Yeah.
He does. Nice. Um, Northern Indian or Southern Indian cuisine?
Southern Indian.
No hesitation.
No.
How about you're an analytics guy. Let's see how you go with this. Michael Jordan or LeBron James?
Michael Jordan.
Love it. You're also, my age, so we're a little bit older. We had enough time to see Jordan. I go
Yeah.
with that. I love it. Some of the we'll jump off of that topic. I love how you answered everything quickly. You didn't have to deliberate. Some of the people that you kind of mentored have built some really nice careers for themselves. I'm thinking people like Naresh Panda and Hurry and some of these others. Talk about what it was like to mentor some very skilled, hard charging resources to balance. I know where you want to get to, but I still need to keep you focused today. That's kind of a management hack that I think is really important because Seven Lakes had immensely talented, hardworking people. And I remember this woman, I think her name was Sushma Ji. She
Mm.
said to Shiva at one point, we were in a meeting with her, she said, you got to be careful because all these IIT guys, they want to run their own company too. Right. So how do you balance keeping people happy in the today with also balancing a level of excitement for, future career success and obtainment? Because I think you did a good job of that. What was your
Right.
secret?
Right. So my secret really was thinking about it from their perspective, Jeremy. In that, like you said, all of these folks have immense potential. They're extremely smart. I mean, most of them are smarter than me too. So I and they have like all of this raw talent and raw energy, but they were a little unpolished, or they could do a little bit of polishing, right? I mean, not that they were bad or anything, but they could, like a diamond really shines when you polish it, right? So that's how I think about it. They're really superbly talented, and as you can see, many of them are in Google and Meta and all of these other top tech companies as well. Some of them gotten out of oil and gas.
Amazon,
Exactly, Amazon.
Walmart, right?
Exactly, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So, and I like to think that the what I did with them while I was while we were working together, kind of guiding them along as they were doing engagement management or pre-sales or implementations, right? Hopefully, led to some of that or helped shape their careers. But what I really did think was, what could I offer to these resources from my experience, right? That would help them grow, because I knew that they were not going to be sticking with Seven Lakes forever, right? But
Sure. Too
when
small the company. Yeah.
exactly, I mean, well, they would come in and they would build a product and they would lead that product, but after a while, their ambitions could grow, right? And it's never in anybody's interest to kind of limit those ambitions, right? And say anything. So my point was, have them give it's a give and take. So I invested into them in terms of whatever I knew of how you would do client management, right? A customer expectations management, really, figuring out, getting to the some of the principles, leadership principles, like action for, a bias for action, really digging
Yep.
deeper, taking ownership, trying to do more with less, right? Managing customer expectations, but keeping customers' interests always in mind. So some of these leadership principles is what I inculcated in them, and then the rest was up to them. So they learned, they internalized it, and then they grew. And at some point, they said, "Well, okay, it's time to move on." But in that time, they were really good, and we have kept in touch after too. In that, I felt like
Yeah.
I gave them something. Me and you and Shiva and everybody. It's not just me, or the only person mentoring them, right? But all of them learned something from us, and I learned something from them in terms of, okay, how do you manage such talent, right? And it's always a learning. So that's what I took away from all of that.
Empathetic leadership, right? And then also coaching to the level of these people are in many cases like Mensa level geniuses, but being
Mm-hmm.
able to actually channel that focus and capability while maintaining professionalism and not having a level of arrogance is important. And I give you a lot of kudos for that. Um, those were fun times, man. I think back very fondly to those kind of early days at Seven Lakes. You know when you're building something special. Um, and I would say, if anything, my only regret is in some ways the company grew like too fast. There was a
Mm-hmm.
massive amount of demand, and it's
Yeah.
just really hard to keep up with that. Where you feel like everything you're doing is like a week behind. Not necessarily from a delivery perspective, but oh man, we need to hire some people, right? And then you're
Right.
rushing to hire people because you really needed them last month.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, we think that this person's going to be on this project, but that person hasn't accepted their offer yet, right? So it was insane, and it kind of set the bar for me for what a fast growing rocket ship could look like. And candidly, I haven't been with a ton of companies since then that have had the same rate of growth or trajectory. I mean, from a revenue perspective, from a client count perspective, from a new products added, like, oh, hey, guess what? Now we have a pre-drill workflow and rig scheduler application, which I loved. I still think, I don't know where that product is, if it still exists today. That
Mm-hmm.
was a beautiful product that the industry still has not solved. And I know that was one of yours. That was a fun one. But
Right.
man,
Yeah.
it was
It's
it
when we
was
worked
what
on
a
together.
wild time. Yeah, it was a wild time. It was a fun time, and I look back very fondly on the times that we spent together. Here's my last question for you, right before we jump off.
Yeah.
What advice would you have for your younger self? If you were to sit down right now with 21-year-old Jimmy Sebastian, what would you tell him?
What I would say is, the world is full of opportunities, right? And you can, you don't have to worry too much about which path you would choose, right? Just take it, be in the moment, live the moment, and then make the most of the moment without thinking too much into the future, and not looking back
That's
too much into the past, with any regrets, or like could have, should have kind of a thing. Just,
yeah.
enjoy today, make the most of today, and then things will fall into place. And whatever you do, that is your best life. So this is the advice that I would have given myself, because I figured this out over the years. It would have made it a little easier if I had known it earlier.
Yeah, I think that's good. It's that's wise, and this is why we called you Jimmy G. Right? You were a had wisdom at a very young age. Jimmy, where can people find you on LinkedIn or websites or any of that stuff?
Yeah, so they can. The easiest way to reach me is through LinkedIn. I mean, I frequently check my LinkedIn and my messages, or my email address. I don't have a personal website. My email address is jimmy.sebastian@gmail.com, or you can find me on LinkedIn, and just connect with me. Looking forward to connecting with everybody, all of your audience too.
I love it. Well, I think this will probably set off a little bit of a series. I think I'll do a little bit of a Seven Lake series. I was kicking this around with Srivan. I think I'm going to have him come on. Well, I think Somya, once she's kind of more established in where her business is at. I don't know what she was doing. I heard he's running like a real estate tech company right now. So I'll have to reach out to him and figure that out. But
Mhm.
those were fun times, Jimmy. You were emblematic of a lot of the rapid growth, success, and effort, and you should be proud of that. And it was really fun having you on today, my man. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. It was like a pleasure being here. And also, yeah, I was just thinking about it. We were having so much fun, and time flew. We didn't realize it. So thank you for all the good times,
Yes.
and thank you for having me on the podcast.